Are we gonna have to watch this military speech? I really don't want. I really don't want to. I really don't want to watch this military speech. Look, if this is what it was all for, is this speech right here, this big summon, I don't think it was worth it. I don't think it was worth it. Most of the stuff that was talked about is stuff that you probably could have talked about over an email, or you could have had live streamed to all these different command posts, and they brought them from everywhere back in order to listen to Pete Hegseth's talk, to what was essentially a pep rally and them explaining a lot of policies that they've already implemented and explained, sometimes through email, or just him just repeating the same type of warrior culture rhetoric that he engages in on a daily basis and is what makes up the entirety of the military's social media presence at this point. But the reason we are going to be watching at least parts of this is because I saw a clip that was too bad from Trump following Pete Hegseth's speech that I just had to talk about it, because this type of rhetoric is how you turn American against American. This type of, like, look, I believe the vast majority of rhetoric around civil war is unbelievably hyperbolic and mostly used by fearmongers and merchants of hysteria who are trying to make you hate your neighbor so you'll go fight them, so they can make money off of your corpse. Okay, that's the intention. You think Tim Pool's going to be in a trench? Do you? Do you think Andrew Tate is going to stand side to side with you with an AR-15 in the mountainside? No. He is going to do a podcast about how based and trad it was when your head exploded from an RPG tied to like a few $100 drone. Okay? That's what he's going to do. Ian Miles Chong is not going to be part of some foreign legion. The people who are doing this are doing it for two purposes. If we're talking about these people, they're fear merchants. They want to make money off of our suffering. Even if we don't get a civil war, if tensions increase, that means more stuff for them to cover on their show. Politics is a job, not a purpose. Then there's the second group of people. And the second group of people are what I like to call the political Neanderthals. And that is to say, these are people so unevolved and with such barbaric ideas that they would never, under normal circumstances, be able to get their ideas or their ideology into elected office. And so the only way you're going to get these people anywhere close to power is through force, is through violence. A lot of like far-right fascist militias or crazy, deluded revolutionary types who think that they're the ones that are going to be the savior of the world. Like, these are the only people that benefit from this type of rhetoric. But sometimes I see language from the president of the United States that makes me question, is he trying to service these people who want to make that pretty dollar? Is he trying to service these people who want to increase tensions? I mean, this is the same guy that watched people storm the Capitol for hours while he sipped his little Diet Coke, and Rudy Giuliani made those calls, ring, 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 pick up the phone, Capitol Hill, let's overturn the election. Using that political violence as leverage, not by directly telling them to do it, but by using the opportunity that the violence provided to apply pressure to those on Capitol Hill. So now that we've arrived at this moment where after Charlie Kirk's assassination, tensions have risen, we have seen other instances of violence. We saw that truck ram into that Mormon church, kill 4 innocent people, burn down the church, wound 8 others. We saw that man get busted just a few days ago who threatened to shoot up a pride parade in Texas before quitting his job and getting caught the day before he said he was going to do it. And you can see on these posts on social media, he's weighing how many people are at the pride parade. Oh, there's 30 of them. I think we could take them out. 30 people, 30 rounds in a magazine. Match made in heaven. That's the type of rhetoric he was engaging in online. Gets snatched up the day before after angrily quitting from his job. And I gotta say, when you're a police officer and you're chasing this guy around, after you see his threats, and you're like, oh, damn, he's gonna do this attack during this pride parade. We better go pick him up at his work. They go to his work. They talk to his job. What does his boss say? Oh, yeah, He came in today and he was really angry and he quit in a rage. There's nothing worse you could hear about somebody who said they're going to do a shooting than they just quit their job in a rage. They're letting go of all of their mortal, mortal ties to the land. Not good. Not a good sign. So tensions are increasing. I would say that some people are blowing it out of proportion. You can't compare this to what we're seeing right now back in the 1970s with Weather Underground and the type of how wide scale the bombings were, the political bombings and the political violence. But it is increasing. It is noticeable. We're more partisanly divided than we have been in a very long time. And the worst part about this is that we don't have anybody in the chief executive's position who knows how to turn down the temperature. And the reason why is the way that Donald Trump's politics works is by turning up the temperature. I mean, these budget talks are just one example. What does Donald Trump have his lackeys saying about the budget talks? After they didn't engage in negotiations, even canceled last-minute talks until the last second, he had them coming out saying that the Democrats want to shut down the government because they want to give health care to illegals. You can't do that with federal, whatever. You're going to give health care to illegals, and they want to make everybody transgender for everybody. This is all just crazy rhetoric to demonize them, and that's bad enough. But when you add that with rhetoric like "I hate my opponents" at a funeral for Charlie Kirk, when you respond to the assassination of Melissa Hortman, when people say, "Did you speak to Governor Mike Waltz about what happened there?" No, that dude's a loony. I don't need to call them about anything. Like Donald Trump directly joked about Nancy Pelosi's husband getting beaten over the head with a hammer as the entire right-wing sphere was in denial, saying that no, it was actually his gay lover. Ha ha, it's gay. See, it's funny now because it's gay. Cause gay balls gay. Ha ha. And he joked about that as the right was trying to classify him as a homosexual. And recently, some people missed this, Donald Trump, it looked like at a recent speech, he was even commenting on Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis, saying, "Sucks to be him now." This is somebody who is, it just can't, number one, he can't help himself, but his politics works best when it's tense. His politics works best when he can label his opponents as evil and he can get those grassroots supporters to just keep dropping those dollars on the campaign, keep paying attention to the right-wing information bubble. I mean, the way Donald Trump engaged in rhetoric around the 2020 election was the perfect example of it. The election's stolen. They're going to steal it. They're destroying the country. We're not going to have a country anymore. They're going to make us communist. If you engage in that type of rhetoric, are we surprised when people think, well, I guess we're headed towards civil war? If they're stealing elections, if we're headed towards communism, we're not going to have a country anymore. America's going to be destroyed. When you engage in this type of rhetoric, tensions go up because people get on edge. If I thought we weren't going to have a country anymore, if I thought America was going to be destroyed, if I thought my country was about to go into ruin, then who wouldn't pick up a rifle? Who wouldn't go defend their nation? Who wouldn't go defend their community? Who wouldn't go defend their family? Who wouldn't pick up where Sherman left off? So that to me, he is an inherently divisive political figure because that is the environment in which he can perform the best. That is where, if he can drag the others into the mud, he is golden. He's very good. He's a great attack dog. He's great at labeling people. The same complaints we hear about Trump getting called a fascist, he's called many people fascist on multiple occasions. So I would say that type of rhetoric already makes it tense. But there's two things, and this is the second one, that have made me particularly concerned. The first one has to be the Department of War declaration with Chicago. So many of you might remember that for whatever reason, we decided to spend a bunch of money to rename the Defense Department, the Department of Defense, the Department of War, because we're run by 12-year-old boys. And that costs money. But as he was doing that, Donald Trump used the opportunity to mention the Windy City and how he wants to deploy troops to the Windy City. Let me show you what he posted. He posted an image of himself as Kilgore from Apocalypse Now. If any of you know of that fantastic movie. And then after he posts this picture of him depicted as Kilgore, you know, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. He replaced that with, I love the smell of deportations in the morning. Chicago about to find out why it's called the Department of War. And then you see Chicago in the background burning as helicopters fly over the horizon, and they change it to Chipacopolis. Now it doesn't really roll off the tongue. Chipalacalypse now doesn't really roll off the tongue. But this type of rhetoric here, why it's called the Department of War. I mean, think about this. You're in Chicago. You love your city. You already don't like the president of the United States for any number of reasons. You turn on the TV and you see a report of him not only joking about deporting your neighbors. You have a different view on, you know, how, you know, your friend Pablo, who's been living next to you for 25 years, working in a sheet metal factory, whether he should be staying, whether he should leave while his daughter, born here, stays, you know, at age 12 without a dad. You know, what's the best scenario here? Can we, you know, grant some people citizenship who's contributing? You hold that position. And then you see on the TV, your city burning, Trump like kitted out like a warlord, as he says, you're about to find out why it's called the Department of War. We're deploying troops to your neighborhood. Also, and when we send ICE over, they're not going to identify themselves. They're not going to identify themselves, and they're all going to be wearing masks. During Trump's first term, ICE had a net, like, neutral approval rating. Right now, it has negative 14 to 15. As he's given ICE the resources to do what he wants them to do, the American people have quickly lost their taste in what they're doing. Because the rapists and the murderers are not just the random fathers and people like waddling out of Home Depot. If you're like a horrible gang member, you're not hanging outside of Home Depot looking for day labor. That doesn't really make sense. You're not going to be putting together a housing project in the morning and doing a drive-by and drug deal in the night. Okay? You'd have to be a particularly entrepreneurial individual. So this was probably the last big, outside of his comments during Charlie Kirk's funeral, divisive statements he's putting out there in a moment of tension that puts me on edge, because I know the type of people that actually follow Trump on Truth Social and believe this nonsense. But this is what Trump said to a room full of military leaders, generals, officers, and people that they actually made come from every corner of the world, setting down their command to listen to the president of the United States. This is what he chose to say about where their soldiers will be training next.
And I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor, stupid. They threw him out of his family business. He was so stupid. I know the family. He becomes governor. He's got money. Not money that he made, but he ran for governor, he won, and now he criticizes us all the time. And last week they had 11 people murdered, 44 people shot. The week before that they had 5 people murdered, 28 people shot. Every weekend they lose 5, 6. If they lose 5, they're considering it a great week. They shouldn't lose any. You shouldn't lose any. This is civilization. And he's always up there saying, we're in very good shape. We don't need the military. No, they need the military.
Those first few words, let's hear it one more time.
Desperately. How about, and I told Pete, we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor, stupid governor.
Using American cities as military training grounds for soldiers. Look, I'm not one to throw like the word fascism around very willy-nilly, but some people say that fascism is most accurately described by the actions and brutality of empire being brought home. That the actions, the war making and brutality that an empire does overseas is brought back domestically. Either way, whatever your position on the definition of fascismo, no American soldier should be learning how to do their job on killing and fighting and bombing or winning wars in American cities with their subject being American citizens. That shouldn't be happening. It's dangerous for a whole number of reasons. Number one, these are not people trained in policing. Police are trained in policing. If you don't like the murder rate in the city, maybe you should train people to deal with the type of crime that is in that city instead of sending in an army like you're fighting ISIS. We're not fighting ISIS. We're fighting drug cartels. We're fighting drug dealers. We're fighting like violent gangs. We're trying to suppress crime and say people who are violent and either isolate them from society in prison, remove them from society, or deal with it in some way, i.e., if they attack an officer, the officer defends himself. But, all these scenarios where you would either add more resources on the ground to both fight poverty and fight crime, fight the cause of crime while fighting crime itself, you would do that through either investing in better training for the police force, community watch programs, maybe community review boards so they can be more trust in the police so people can better communicate with them so they can better police the communities that they govern. You can have more cops on certain patrols in areas of higher violence or higher crime if you have more people on patrol, and that takes money, that takes resources, that takes people. And Trump wants to solve the problem of resources, people, and money, but they're saying, screw it, deploy the troops. But they're not trained in how to be cops. They're not trained in how to do, and without the authority of the governor of the state you're entering, they don't have the authority to be doing a lot of what they did in Washington, D.C. And again, they're not trained to be cops. And what happens when you take somebody who doesn't have the training to be a police officer, but does have the training to win a war, fight a war, and, take out a soldier on the battlefield? How do you do that? Go from that to dealing with like somebody smoking a joint on their porch stoop, to somebody, doing a drug deal in the backyard, or, somebody running away, or somebody, the different scenarios that they would have to deal with with policing that police officers are regularly trained on, they are not, because they have to deal with a whole other system and a variety of situations on the battlefield. So they don't have time and they don't train them on those things, especially when talking about what, National Guard. I mean, there's a certain amount of riot control skills that can be turned over to these people, but we're talking about riot control tactics to protect federal property. We're talking about the types of things that you put the soldiers around a business so nobody burns down the business because nobody's going to mess with the soldier boy in fatigues and a machine gun. That's a little different than military patrols in high crime neighborhoods. That's a little different than armored vehicles going down the street where they hear that people work the corner. And to do it without the approval of the state means no cooperation from the governor's mansion, means no cooperation from the city council or the mayor. Hell, I don't even know if you're going to get much cooperation from the local police department. This type of stuff where you're saying, we're going to deploy troops in your city, but we're going to use it to train. This doesn't seem like you're treating their city with respect, their community with respect. People don't want to get patted down by soldier boys while they're walking down the street. People don't want to get harassed by them. Look, most of these soldiers are not like bad people, and most of the interactions people are having up in Washington D.C., they're not like harassing people excessively and beating people. There hasn't been any incident yet. But the more places we deploy troops, the more places we deploy people to do policing jobs who aren't police, who aren't trained on how to do it, who don't know what they're doing. And definitely when we put them in areas that are actually going to have higher rates of violent crime, the more likely that something happens, an accident, a disaster.
Occurred is occurred.
Would you say Counterpoint's prior military experience is helpful or hurtful to him as an officer when he was a cop? I agree with you, and why the way? Just asking.
No, I think if somebody has been a soldier and a cop and they have training in both areas, that training can actually supplement each other. There is some training you get in the armed forces when it comes to like, you know, some like scenarios that could be useful, but if you're made to be a soldier, you're made to be a soldier, not a police officer. If you're made to be a police officer, you're made to be a police officer, not a soldier. Yeah, you wouldn't take like a cop from Detroit and tell them to take a trench in eastern Ukraine. That'd be ridiculous. Just as you wouldn't take a soldier and say, hey, we need you to stake out this location, and well, we need you to go in there, and remember, do you know to read them their Miranda rights? Do they know what Miranda rights are? Do they like there's a bunch of stuff that they have to know. And so you're treating policing these communities very haphazardly. You're treating the possibility of an accident very haphazardly, which again increases the likelihood of an accident occurring. And once, you know, there is like a Kent State style, somebody shoots a rifle and then, oops, somebody else gets scared, they shoot a rifle too. Like, you can't undo it once it's done. And with the way that they're introducing these soldiers, like chest beating, almost like we will go there whether you like it or not. Your community is high crime spiking through the roof, even though every single city he's chosen to be an example, there's no big spike in crime. There's even been moderate decreases in crime in the last 2 years. That's why they keep relying on the 2023 numbers to justify their deployments. If you tell a community that you're going to find out why it's called the Department of War, and we're going to use your city like a training ground, you're not setting up a situation where these soldiers, who are already going to be working without the experience they should have to be doing the job, are going to be walking into a situation where the community is not looking at them positively. They're going to be looking at them like an occupying army, and it's soldiers from their own country. But the way that the president has framed it, the way that he can never engage in de-escalation and he can only escalate, the way that he talks about his political opponents and refuses to try to find some way to cooperate. You want to get more policing resources to high crime neighborhoods? You think these cities would look across at you and say, hey, more federal resources, never mind? Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, Bowser, the Big Turtle person, they run D.C., Mario's buddy, they run DC, and they were actually pretty positive on the idea of more resources. They wanted better communication because it was announced without telling the mayor beforehand, without telling the city council, without telling the residents of DC. They just said soldiers were going to show up, and then soldiers showed up. They didn't coordinate it. So even if you wanted to do it effectively, it's being done in a way that seeps the effectiveness out of it. The only hope you really have is that just the fear factor of the soldiers walking on the street are going to tell some people to stay home instead of, messing with that neighborhood. So, I mean, I assume that's probably where the moderate decrease in crime came from these deployments. But is that sustainable? Just because there hasn't been an incident, does that mean we should just assume there will not be an incident in the future when we could just consider ourselves really lucky that we haven't had something like that? And by the way, when I say we haven't had an incident, I don't mean we haven't had any incidents. There's been instances where military armored cars have rammed into civilian cars, and well, which car do you think wins? Either way, the way Trump engages in rhetoric makes it a doomed initiative trying to build relationships with the residents of these cities. If you talk to these communities like you're going to war with them, or that you're going to use them as a training ground, they're not going to be welcoming to your deployments that were not even approved by their governor in the first place. He's just setting himself to fail with communicating with these communities. But I really don't think he feels that he has to. I think he just thinks he has to do and find whatever way possible to do it.